Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we continue our series of videos on the pass to developers for December 2021. Today we are doing the big one for naval. Obviously the Iowa-class battleships is very large for individuals, but for me the Yamato-class battleships are something which are even bigger when it comes to history. And today we're going to be having a look at the Musashi in the 1942 configuration. Let's get into having a look at the IJN's Musashi. The Musashi was the second battleship in the Yamato-class series of the Japanese Imperial Navy during the Second World War. The flagship of the joint Japanese fleet, and it was named after the ancient Japanese province of Musashi. The Musashi and the same type Yamato were the largest and most powerful battleships in the world at the time. They had a displacement of 74,000 tons. The main caliber guns were 460 millimeters each, and in August of 1934, Fujimoto proposed his last version of the battleship. With a standard displacement of 50,000 tons. It was slightly longer and wider than the real Yamato, but it had a very shallow draft. The offensive characteristics of the ship were more reminiscent of the super powerful battlecruisers, but are still impressive, with 12 510mm guns in 4 towers, 16 155mm guns, and then 8 to 10 heavy 127mm guns, with 12 aircraft with 3 catapults and a speed of 30 knots. At the same time, the protection was also excellent at 410 belt and 280mm on the deck. Funny enough, when it comes to proposals, they don't always meet reality. It is clear that such a concentration of weapons and armor in a relatively small displacement presupposed all possible lightening of the hull and overloading by the upper weight, with consequences in the form of insufficient stability. The Japanese Navy could get a very interesting ship. However, after overturning the destroyer, the IJN Tomazuru, designed by Fujimoto, built precisely on such principles, to fit 2 liters in a liter mug, the main ideologist of the new developments was forced to retreat into the shadows. He was returned to his former post on the 9th of January 1934, but the next day the chief designer of the fleet died suddenly, and his place was finally taken by Rear Admiral of the Technical Service, Keiji Fukuda, who led the main development cycle of the Yamato project. As soon as the work on the Musashi was completed, with a 3-month delay in its commissioning, this was due to the installation of additional communication equipment, which allowed the ship to be used as a flagship of the fleet. The experience gained at the IJN Yamato was also taken into account. Back in April, the first-rank captain, Kaworu Arima, the former commander of the battlecruiser the IJN Hei, who was appointed interim commander for the construction period, visited the lead ship of the series, along with an impressive landing from its crew members. Now, Arima has changed from temporary status to permanent and was officially appointed commander of Musashi. The ship moved from Nagasaki to Kure for final refitting, and then finally, it was already included in the first squadron, along with the Yamato, Nagato, and the Mutsu. And so far, the battleship remained a Yokosuka, replenishing the crew and completing minor work. On the 10th of August, Musashi arrived at the Hashirajima parking lot, where it underwent full power trials, as well as maneuvering, anchoring, and a seaplane training exercise. Despite the wartime, the fleet was in no hurry with the commissioning of a new combat unit. Musashi spent the entire September in Kure, where additional equipment and testing continued. They strengthened the small caliber artillery. 4 more of the same were added to the 8 designed 3-gun 25mm. They installed a Type 21 radar and also fire control devices. Only on the 28th of September, the ship returned to Harisajima for the next set of tests. The exercise and training in the western part of the inland sea took 3 months, and on the 1st of November, Arima received production to the next rank, and the Musashi was now commanded by a rear admiral. Finally, on the 18th of January 1943, Musashi went out into the sea. After leaving Kure, it headed for Truk, where it arrived on the 22nd of January. Like the Yamato, remained aloof from the hardest struggle that the United Fleet was waging at this time. The Musashi replaced the Yamato on the 11th of February 1943 as the flagship of the commander of the United Fleet, and on the 11th of May, the Americans launched an operation against Altu in the Aleutian Islands group, an important outpost of the Japanese defense in the north. Koga hastily formed an attack force consisting of the 1st Battleship Division, which at the time consisted of 1 Musashi, and then the 2nd Aircraft Carrier Division, which had the Unyo and also the Hiyo in it, 2 heavy cruisers and also 9 destroyers. On the 17th of May, the ships set out to sea, taking a course from Truk to Yokosuka. The Musashi, in this flight, incidentally delivered the ashes of Admiral Yamamoto to its homeland. After a short sailing out to sea, the detachment led by Musashi returned to Yokosuka on the 23rd of June. The battleship was faced with a rare event in wartime, a visit by the Emperor and also top officials of the state. The visit took place on the 24th of June in the highest secrecy, and in addition to the Emperor and his brother, the Lord Keeper of the Seal, the Marquis of Kido, the Minister of the Navy, Admiral Shimada, the Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral Nagano, and also the Chief of the Air Force, and a number of ministers and senior officials of the fleet gathered on board the Musashi. After making a round of the team's quarters, the Emperor took the ship's elevator to the top of the tower-like superstructure, and the visit, which took 3.5 hours, ended with a gala dinner. The next day, Musashi left Yokosuka and arrived in Kure on the 27th of June, where on the 1st of July, a new Type 22 Model 4 radar was installed on the battleship. The rest of the month, the ship spent in exercises and tests of equipment in Hashirajima and Kura. On the last day of July, it left Yokosuka and headed for Truk, where it arrived on the 5th of August. The Musashi remained in rear idleness on Truk until the 10th of February 1944, where then it sailed for Yokosuka, accompanied by the light cruiser the Yoyodo and the destroyer the Takanami. It was his turn to work as a military transport. Arriving at the scene on the 15th of February, the battalion took on board a special separate battalion of the Navy and an Army battalion, ammunition, fuel in barrels, and also cars. This detachment was intended to reinforce the Palau garrison, where Musashi headed on the 24th of February, accompanied by 3 destroyers. On the way, it got into a strong typhoon. Despite the excellent seaworthiness, most of the cargo on the upper deck was washed into the sea. Although the battleship itself could easily hold off a 12-point storm of 18 knots, it had to reduce the speed to 6 knots so as to not lose the escort destroyers. Arriving in Palau on the last day of February of a leap year in 1944, Musashi stayed there for a full month. A single battleship, albeit the largest in the world by itself, could do little in the event of a raid by American aircraft carriers or a landing. Most likely, the commander of the United Fleet just wanted to be in the center of possible events. However, at the same time, Koga moved its command post to the shores just in case. Initially, he intended to return to the Musashi, but then decided to travel with his headquarters to Davao in the Philippines by plane. A long, useless stay in Palau ended in major trouble. On the 29th of March, Musashi was finally ordered to leave the island due to the threat of the air attack. This is why the exit was scheduled for the evening. However, the danger awaited the battleships not from the air, but from under the water. At 5:44 p.m., he had just left the Western Passage in the reefs and was on the northerly course when he was struck by the torpedo. Of 6 fired by the SS-282 under the command of Lieutenant Commander J. Scott. The torpedo hit the very nose outside the anti-torpedo protection. The explosion punched a 6-meter hole in diameter and about 20 meters squared in area. The bow compartments were flooded, including the room for the hydrophone operators. The explosion killed the entire shift, which was 7 sailors. The amount of water poured in was practically equal to that accepted by the IJN Yamato, 3,000 tons, which allowed it to speak of a certain rate of damage to the soft nose as a result of one torpedo hit. The damage level was clearly too high. Musashi arrived in Kyoto on the 3rd of April, replacing the Yamato in dry dock number 4, which had left the plant just 2 weeks ago. In 3 weeks, the bow of the battleship was completely repaired. The ship left Dock 89 on the 22nd of April. Both side 155mm turrets were removed, replacing them with 6 triple 25mm machine guns and another 21 of the same installation, and 25 single 25mm were added. As with the Yamato, 2 huge 150cm spotlights were also removed, and the Musashi now carried 130 25mm barrels in the 35 triple sets and 25 single mounts. The radars were represented by Type 13 and also semi-artillery Type 22. In addition, depth charges were equipped at the stern overhang. Closer to the end of the repair, the commander of the ship, Captain First Rank Asakura, became Rear Admiral. Now that through the efforts of the Americans, Truk had become a potential place of death for Japanese ships of all classes, the main base of battleships had moved to the deep rear. Musashi entered the connection with the 2nd and 3rd Divisions of aircraft carriers and 4 destroyers on the 10th of May 1944, and then headed for Okinawa. After staying on the island for 2 days, the battleship headed for Tavi-Tavi, reaching its destination on the 16th of May. Vice Admiral D. Ozawa led his mobile fleet there, which included the 1st Division, arriving at Tavi-Tavi on the 14th of May. The fleet spent the remainder of May and the beginning of June in exercises, and for the first time, the Yamato and Musashi participated in joint artillery firing at a maximum distance of about 22 miles. And then on the 10th of June, it was time for hostilities. The command was going to conduct Operation Con in the area of the Black Island. The detachment included both battleships, as well as the 5th Heavy Cruiser Division, the Haguro and Miyoko, and an escort from the light cruiser Noshiro, and also some destroyers. The Musashi was annihilated on the 24th of October 1944 during the battle in the Sibuyan Sea. This battle was a continuous attack by American aircraft carriers, aircraft on the Japanese Central Formation, which included both battleships. The attacks were intended by aircraft from the 38th U.S. Navy Task Force, which included Task Force 2, which was the Intrepid, Cabot, and the Independence, under the command of Rear Admiral Bogan. The Task Force 3 as well, of the Lexington, Essex, Preston, and Langley, under the command of the Rear Admiral Sherman, and also the 4th Task Force, the Enterprise Franklin Shan Justino, and the Bella Wood, under the command of Rear Admiral Davison. So that kind of gives you an unfortunate picture of the different power levels at the time between, of course, the Americans and the Japanese, and why maybe building these massive ships probably wasn't a great idea. The construction of the ship, though, of this size could only be provided by the Mitsubishi shipyard in Nagasaki, but there too, the launching device had to be strengthened. Although the length of the dock was sufficient, Musashi was founded here on the 29th of March 1938 under Building Number 2. A huge amount of materials required during installation led to the construction of additional warehouses with a total area of 240,000 meters squared at the shipyard. The creation of such principled ships was carried out in the strictest secrecy. All the engineers involved in the construction of Musashi were asked to sign a solemn oath of non-disclosure before the start of work. The foreigners became the main problem, and there were many of them in Nagasaki. The open slip in which it was supposed to be laid was clearly visible both from the sea and from the land, and initially they wanted to close the construction site with an aluminium wall, 270 meters long and 40 meters wide and 36 meters high. However, strong winds, which are not uncommon in this area, could have simply knocked down the camouflage. And then experts tried waterproof fabric, bamboo, and even nice straw, and in the end the dock was covered with a high fence of sismal mats with a total length of 2,700 meters and a weight of over 400 tons. 2,500 kilometers of ropes were used to make them, and after the descent, the ship's hull was additionally covered with camouflage nets. Photos of all workers, whose number reached 2,000, were placed in special albums, and everyone who entered and exited the construction sites was compared with them. Before the start of welding, the shipyard management conducted a special experiment photographing the work through the sisal wall from different distances. And then based on the results of the experiment, double barriers were installed in critical places. During the construction of the battleship, fires broke out 3 times. They had to be liquidated on their own. After all, the firefighters had no clearance, and then all work was organized in such a small way that none of the workers could receive all the drawings and specifications. Even design engineers were only given a few pieces of documentation. A very limited circle of people had a full understanding of the project, and during the descent of Musashi, when the sisal coverlet would have to be removed one way or the other, the police completely blocked access to the seaside part of Nagasaki. The descent took place in the early morning of the 1st of November 1940 without the traditional ceremony. The engineers used special stopes that had a bulge upward with a radius of curvature of 10,000 meters, and the width of the slopes was almost 4 meters, a value that has not been surpassed either before or after the construction of these battleships. As a result, the pressure of the launching skids on the lanes was less than 1.2 tons per meter squared, and as the engineers made every effort to ensure that most of the ship's construction was carried out on the slipway, the Musashi's launch mass continued to increase, and this in turn required additional measures to ensure its overall longitudinal strength during descent. The hull weight at that moment was 35,737 tons, which remained the record for the launch weight of a warship until the 1970s. So the Musashi was a heavy bugger, is probably the way to put it. With 3 triple-mounted 460mm guns, 4 triple-mounted 150mm guns, 6 dual-mounted 127s, 8 triple-mounts 25s, and 2 dual-mounts 13.2s in 1942. This is the one which is being passed. And remember, we could get a few variants of the Musashi, depending on what type of AA armament you wanted, as it increased throughout the war and still was sunk by aircraft, showing how air dominance and air superiority was really king of the Pacific. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Professor X 1718, Orange Tail, Sakoshi Tiger, BRFC 15, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, and then Kyle Kin, Barine, Lafouche, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.